I'm not sure what I want to do. I have a little vacation time. Nothing but potential. But then we make a decision. Oh, I'm going to Canada. Now, as soon as I made the decision, bought tickets, now it's, a divine right that I'm going to Canada. My plane should be on time and things should just go a certain way. And anything that's obstructing my plan is, just totally unfair and often felt as though it's intolerable. Before I made the decision, nothing but make the decision. Now this is the way it should be. I may allot 4 hours to get to Denver. And on occasion, you may have found that sometimes there's road work. Sometimes there's accidents. Sometimes things are closed. And that's in my way. Which is a fascinating context when we think about 7 billion other human beings. Not even counting animals and weather and the way the universe is and the fact that, maybe I'm part of all of this. And what would be different if I was able to be a part of things as opposed to being the center of things? And so we're kind of working with this idea of self-cherishing, me being the most important thing that I think about and how much arises from that. And so when we really start to notice how that grasping or aversion and how I create, karmic imprints is really always centered around how I would like things or I'd like to avoid things. Then we can put a greater context into, well, if I can eliminate the real source of my suffering, fundamentally, I'll suffer less. That's one thing. And so the idea of Tonglen is that I'm going to become willing to take upon myself the suffering of others. Now, that goes right to the heart of things. Because it's not me and mine comparing you and yours. It's not, wow, I want to get the good parking spot. Wow, I want to get the nice chair. What if you get there early? Well, I better get there early. Or, what about if I thought about everyone else and thought, boy, I suffer a lot, others suffer a lot. What if I became willing to take on their suffering? And that very act actually eliminates the source of my suffering. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama would call that wisely selfish. Meaning that by being really generous and thoughtful and kind and tending to others, I'm actually nurturing my path to enlightenment. I'm cutting through the source of my own suffering. And fundamentally, the more I think about me, whether I'm sitting in a chair, if I sit in a chair, I start thinking about me in a chair. And I start to wiggle. It's a little uncomfortable. And I start focusing on my leg, and that's kind of, And you'll notice that the more that the focus is right here, the more uncomfortable it can get. But if I'm sitting here and my attention is somewhere else, watching a movie, listening to something, attending to, I don't even notice me in a chair. I can sit quite comfortably for a couple hours. But you tell me to sit here for 10 minutes by myself and breathe? Ooh, that's a whole different universe. So understand this context is the context with which we really look at how do we really deal with the source of this suffering, this self-cherishing attitude. And we've already unpacked this misunderstanding of self and how we attach labels and exaggerate things, best day ever, worst day ever, and intolerable events that happen that somehow we were able to tolerate, and how we get worked up over things, and then it's Tuesday. But boy, all week long, ups and downs and all that. So we unpacked that, and we really looked at, well, the real source of my suffering, and isn't the event itself, right? It's not the event, it's not what's happening. It's how I'm relating to it. It's how much energy I attach to it. It's how much the qualities I attribute to it. Whether it's my favorite picture you know, the cup my grandmother gave me. My expectation about how Saturday ought to be, because it's my day off, and how I want it to be. And then somebody needs my help on a Saturday, or my grandmother's cup breaks. Then it becomes this terrific thing. But it's a cup breaking. Doesn't hurt. My grandmother's cup, it's a traumatic event. Because we may think that I'm really attached to the cup my grandmother gave me. But my grandmother's not in that cup. My grandmother's in my heart. And the cup's a reminder. But the suffering's how I relate and what I attach to a cup. And we can see that with all the things that we have in our lives. You know, all the things we have in storage. And all these valuable things that we look at every 3 months. And we can't let go of. Because we see the attachment there. And so when we start to understand that things come and go in our lives, things change, and that my mental and emotional suffering is really tied to how much importance I put on events and people and places and things. And we've already kind of uncovered that a lot of that doesn't really relate to how things actually are. So we have deceptive appearances. And that we kind of fill in the blanks a lot, and we attribute qualities to people, places, and things in ways that are not inherently in them. And that applies to people we like, people we don't like, you know, good days, bad days. I mean, ultimately, what's the difference between a good day and a bad day? Pretty much what we're paying attention to. You know, and any bad day that we have, a terrible day, how many bad things happened in that day? 1? Maybe 2? How many good things happened from the time you woke up to the time you went to bed? How many kindnesses were there? So what we're paying attention to becomes our reality. And how I pay attention to it, how I relate to it, how I attribute qualities to it. We get triggered, and at the source of it is how I want things to be, this self-cherishing. So last time we were here, we looked at the idea of really going after that sense of self. And the Tonglen practice that was described was to really reflect upon our mother, someone we really care for, someone who has helped us so much. And we think about their suffering, their challenges, their struggles, and we want them. You know, as we unpacked, not just I want them to not suffer, but I really want to understand their suffering, all that they've done for me, and all that they've done for others, and imagine how their struggles have been in life, and since they were a kid, and what they've had to go through, and really have this visceral sense of empathy for them. So that as we engage in a practice of Tonglen, where we really want to take on that, be willing to take on that suffering and to see them getting better, we really understand their suffering. It's not a vague concept. It's not, yeah, everybody suffers. I've really unpacked, and I've seen the struggles that my mom went through, and I became willing to think, man, I want to pay back just a little bit. And so then we unpacked the practice of visualizing your mother, someone you can, a deep caring, and then visualizing all of her suffering coming on our in-breath, and like a black smoke just coming out of them. All of that suffering, all that hardship, into our nostrils, right down our heart, where our self-cherishing little black dot is. So it breathes in, and that willingness to take on that suffering just cuts through and eliminates that self-cherishing, this radiant, virtuous light that appears, comes out, and we give all of our merit, all of our virtues, wishing them the best, wanting them to be well. Not miserly, not just some of my merit, like I really hear this is all you. And with each breath, seeing them get a little better, a little more vibrant. And then, having done a practice like that, that we get familiar with someone we care for deeply, then we bring it to some friends that we know that they're struggling, and we do a practice for them. Then we expand it out to those that, kind of neutral, and then ultimately to the people that we don't like. We work our way through that. And so this practice is one that we invited people to try out during the week. And hopefully you got a chance to do it. I was doing it the last couple weeks. And it really, for me, is just this incredible softening as I interact with people, wishing them well. I mean, what a difference that on my own side, how it just softened the edges and allowed me to be more attentive. So if you're trying that, hopefully you found the same. I was able to participate in a retreat this last weekend, and 47 retreatants. And being able to do a practice like that, where you just care for and tend to others and wish them the best, it's really transformative experience. So we practice in a more formal setting, unpacking that, but then we get to take it out into the world. And then when you're in the supermarket line, you can be wished that, See the people out there struggling, pushing carts, or, people that we're passing by, wishing them well. When we're driving in traffic, we start to realize that we're not in traffic, we are traffic, And we all want to get somewhere safe. And these are just, what a shift in our mind that allows that to happen. So that's where we had left off. We talked about that practice and bringing it in and wishing well for others. And let's see what the next stage of advice is here. Okay, so once we have practiced taking and sending in this manner with regards to our parents, friends, indifferent people, and finally, our enemies, the people we don't like, we can take a 360-degree approach and reach out to every sentient being, saying every sentient being avoids the blurry of vastness. Let's see, saying that. Well, let me rephrase this a bit. Yeah, so just recognizing that all sentient beings, animals, human beings, all races, all worlds, all sentient beings, to really think about their suffering and to be able to include that in the breath, and then wish them nothing but the best in all of your merit and virtue. And as before, taking and sending on the basis of loving kindness and compassion for each and every sentient being. We then want to extend it beyond a mental meditation. So the advice here is something that I have found quite beneficial and somewhat awkward, I think, for Western folks. In their Tibetan traditions, they really believe in the sound of wishes, of aspirations, of mantra, of sending prayers, of saying it. And we say our prayers out loud, and as Chris knows, in those monasteries, they're loud. They're not these quiet, silent places. They're saying their prayers out loud. They want all sentient beings to hear them. They want the vibrations of mantras. But there's also a ripening in our own mind as we say things. And so his advice here is that we recite verses verbally to this effect. For example, express in words the aspiration, may I become a cause for all worldly and transcendent joy for every sentient being. May I become a cause for dispelling the suffering of every sentient being. There's some very beautiful verses to this effect in the 3rd chapter of Shantideva's Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life. The idea is to saturate our mind, our voice, and our physical activities in the practice of taking and giving. So that we're imbuing it, we're saying it under our breath, we're thinking it. You don't want to be accused of, needing to be taken to a hospital or thing. So if you're sitting in a room mumbling a lot, but where you can as you walk to verbalize that, to have our mind saturated. And what you're doing is you're really imbuing your activities, that all of my activities are now meritorious, virtuous. I'm ripening my mind. And one of the most impactful teachings that I've ever received, I was just a guy sitting in what these monks are in town, you know, and I mean, these monks are coming for a week and they're giving these teachings. I thought, I'm going to go to those. You know, I've been going to the Dharma Center. I was listening to Venerable Geshe Gelsen up there, and these monks are going to be in town. So I made a commitment. I went every night, and one of the Geshes there. Just never forget sitting there and seeing this rich compassion coming from this monk whose whole teaching was this, that every single thing we do, we could have the aspiration, may this be a benefit to all sentient beings, that every action I engage in can be of benefit to all the sentient beings. And he gave all these examples, even going to the bathroom. I can have that wish. And all the bacteria is taken care of. And, you know, just that, to be just so imbued that every interaction he has is, how is this helping others? How is this on the path? How can I be of benefit? And the thing that profoundly hit me was that he wasn't just saying words. I mean, he was living that. And you know, that talk had me check in a little more, which eventually led me to becoming a monk, which eventually led me to a monastery in India, which eventually led me, some years later, to being assigned to a teacher at a monastery, and it turns out to be that same monk became my teacher years later at a monastery in India. And very fortunate. Today he's the abbot of the monastery, of Ganden Shartse Monastery. And it's not shifted a bit. Just pure ethical. I mean, I remember he held my hand that first time. You know, I'm a guy, like, what, you want to hold my hand? I was like, yeah, you can hold my hand. Please. It was just so much love there. It was just, I mean, I just melted. I was, you know. So this advice, you know, it has meaning, it has purpose. And it has an effect. It has an effect. And the idea here that he's pointing out is that we saturate our mind. Because what is your mind normally doing? You know, what's it normally doing? Well, half the time we're not even aware of what it's doing, right? Because it's off somewhere, you know. And we're wondering where our car keys are. But when we're actually aware of where our mind is, where is it? And it's often tied into attachments, aversions, worries, fears, planning, rumination. Imagine if we consciously had this tape recorder in my mind about how every moment of my life can be beneficial on a path to enlightenment to benefit all sentient beings. That, hey, is there any way that I can alleviate the suffering of others? Is there any way that I can be a benefit? What is it that I can be doing right now that's virtuous and beneficial? What if that tape was rolling? All the time, saturating the mind. And we have an inertia in this other way. And so that's where every little thing we do, I mean, we were talking to somebody yesterday, right? And we were talking about like rosaries, prayer beads, and you know, and they were talking about how, you know, they were feeling like that was just something that they get hooked in, you know, it's just, watch me and my prayer beads. And they totally missed the point. You know, when we have a prayer bead, it's a reminder of a path to enlightenment. And as I hit a prayer bead and I go, oh, money paid me home, my mind is thinking, may all beings be free of suffering. And I'll tell you what, that's what mantra is, protection of the mind. Mantra means protection of the mind, to protect the mind. And what it does, instead of letting it go on to attachments, aversions, worries, fears, resentments, all that, it is now contemplating, may all beings be free of suffering, you know, a reminder of a day that will never come again, you know, and an opportunity right now in this very lifetime to achieve enlightenment and freedom and liberation. That as I'm saying a prayer, I'm thinking about all other sentient beings. It's not just a rosary or a bead, or, that it's a reminder. And as I touch it, it's a reminder of all the others in a lineage that has made this moment possible for me to be of benefit to others. It's a reminder. And a tool, like any other tool. And so the instructions here is it's really important to make some time for ourselves out of the hustle and the bustle, to really reflect upon the ways that we attach to things, the way we get in trouble, the way that we wind up making big deals over things that 2 days from now I'm not even going to think about. And start ripening the mind to how I can be a benefit to others, and thinking about others that have helped us and how we can help them, and doing a little Tonglen, and then slowly expanding that out. And at some point really realizing that all sentient beings are the cause for your enlightenment. We kind of unpacked that the other day. They are the opportunities for us to have what we have. And there's nothing that we have that isn't because of others. Nothing. The roads we drive on, the cars we have, the food we eat, the clothes. We can't even count how many beings were responsible for us to be here in this moment. We forget all that because I become the center of the universe. And all those other people are in my way. They're not the cause for my enlightenment. And we forget this. So shifting that inertia, whether it's saying some prayers, whether it's, verbally, just wishing that, walking down the street, passing people, and just wishing them well. This is ways to shift and get us out of being that center of our own universe. I mean, a part of an interdependent arising that can make good use of a rare and precious human rebirth. We have that opportunity every moment when we're aware. But we need some inertia. So that advice then brings to the next session here, which is essentially what we've been talking about. The next verse is apply those two to the breath, taking, giving. So really get proficient at a practice that as I'm breathing in the suffering of others. As I'm breathing out, I'm offering merit, virtue, seeing them well. And, one of the best kept secrets in town is that you're breathing 24 hours a day. It's one of those things that we're rarely aware of. But when you become aware of it, now it's a tool. Now it's a tool to be in the present moment. Breath only happens now. And in this present moment, it's a reminder. That can be helpful. But he says, good point here, a little side note. It should not replace a straight breath awareness as a practice. So if you're doing shamatha like we did at the start, where that's the focus, the goal of a shamatha practice is to develop attention, to settle the mind. That's what it's doing. This is a different meditation. So they're not the same. They have different effects. And so if you have your sessions to where you really concentrate the mind, and then as you engage in another practice of Tonglen, it becomes a separate practice. And then the advice is that we can practice in our time alone and just bring it into our everyday life. And when you see someone who's angry or in pain, when you visit someone in a hospital, when you hear of suffering, that practice can automatically be there for you. And it's so wonderful because so often we feel hopeless, helpless even. We hear of another tragedy, we hear some suffering, and we feel like we can't do anything. And we have this moment, this opportunity. And there's rationale for this. That, as a monk, when we travel and do things, any Tibetan or anyone that you'd be around, and they'd see like a dead animal or something suffering, immediately you'll hear, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. And you're thinking, well, how's that helping the dead animal? And would you have brought about a virtuous state of mind had you not seen the dead animal? The animal, the person that's suffering, the people that were brought aware of, they become the trigger, the condition that gives rise to your meritorious practice for all sentient beings. They immediately become karmically linked as a condition that gave rise to a virtuous state of mind of us wanting to benefit all sentient beings. So there is this exchange that takes place. So it's not something that's just a thing to make you feel good. There's an immediate connection that takes place. And so when others that are suffering, they become the cause for our enlightenment. Our enlightenment, imbued with bodhicitta to benefit all sentient beings, they become karmically linked. We're in this together. It's an interdependent arising. So this is the interplay that takes place. And so there is always something happening, everything cause and effect that flows on. And so it's, for me, I've found just so empowering, when I see others suffering. And I understand people have to suffer. I mean, we all have to do our things and grow. But when they trigger a virtuous state of mind, and we have it so innately, don't we? When we see someone fall, we want to help. We see someone struggle, we want them to do better. And the more we can imbue that, in that process, we're just cutting right through our self-cherishing, that source of our own suffering. And so now, we are coming to, we're getting right at the end of point 2. 3 objects, 3 poison, 3 roots of virtue. 3 objects, 3 poison, 3 roots of virtue. Now this is really the real gift of mind training practice, is that it's about how we engage in life. It's about everything in our life becoming a practice of Dharma. It's really about saturating the mind and imbuing our activities in a way that we get to practice Dharma when I'm grocery shopping, when I'm running down the street, when I see an accident, when I'm tired, when somebody's, yelling at me. This is Lojong practice. And here they're making a point. 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. In other words, what they're saying is that, I shouldn't get ahead of the verses. The next verse refers to 3 objects: agreeable, disagreeable, and neutral. Okay, so objects, people. You see somebody, you like them, you don't like them. I don't know them that much, so I'm kind of neutral. 3 objects. Could be food. I like this food, don't like that food. It's all right. Our mind, pretty much, as soon as it sees anything, it throws them into one of these categories. Like, don't like, not so sure about. And we're going to notice that we have things that arise within us, See someone I haven't seen in a long time, joy. How are you? See someone I don't like, oh my God, angry. It's just like that. So 3 objects, which give rise to 3 poisons. The 3 mental poisons, the words they're using here: attachment, hostility, and confusion. So the 3 root delusions that keep us trapped in samsara, these 3 core root delusions, sometimes called attachment, aversion, and ignorance. So a misunderstanding about how things arise and who I am and how things really are. And I really like these, and I think it's really going to make me happy if I have a bunch of these. And I really don't like these, and I'm going to be miserable. That pretty much my whole life, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to collect pleasurable events, avoid painful ones. And in that whole process, I'm creating attachment, aversion, and it's out of a confusion, a misunderstanding about what actually gives rise to a lasting sense of happiness, self, and how this all happens, the interdependent arising that we've already spent a bunch of weeks on. So these 3 objects, 3 mental poisons. I see someone, I like them, I want to be around them more, I miss them. That's what I was noticing today. People posting, like someone posted a picture of a cute little dog that had passed, a year ago, and I really miss you. A friend I miss. There's a lot of missing. I've noticed that pop up today a lot, missing. So, sometimes the people we love a lot, aren't they often the source of much of our emotional suffering? Either because they're not around as much as I like, or they're not treating me the way I would like, or I worry about them. And the people we don't care about so much, we don't know, not much suffering there. See them walking down the street. When we do our meditations on bringing to mind the people we really like and wishing them well, the people we're kind of neutral about and the people we don't like, well, we have strong feelings on either end. But the people we don't really know, not much there. But the other ones, you'll see this attachment and aversion that arise. And so we'll start to notice here that as my attachment creates pain, an attachment creates pain. I don't have this, I wish I had more of that. We can even get really upset at the people we love the most, can't we? Over something really petty. Over something very minute. Because it was so inconsiderate of them. How many times do we have that? Someone that we really care. Someone who's been our friend. Someone we've cared for. And they do one thing and we're off the handle. Someone we care for. It happens. Happens a lot, right? And then they do something we don't like, and then, or say something in a way we didn't hear right. And now they're the source of my suffering. But are they actually the source of my suffering? Or is it, I want them to be different than they are, the source of my suffering? Or me not looking at the full picture of all that they do and the whole of our relationship over many years, and focusing on one thing that they're doing. So what we're saying here is that these 3 objects, as things arise, like and don't like, neutral, certain things arise: attachment, aversion, misperception, confusion. Well, that usually creates a lot of suffering. That usually just spins the wheel of samsara, keeps us trapped. We create karma. We create, futile attempts of trying to find people to just behave the way we'd like them to behave. Because if you guys would all just buck up and act right, I could be happy, But you're just not cooperative. You're just not. You don't do what I want you to do. Don't do it the way I'd like you to. The traffic's not the way I'd like it. Just, come on, work with me, would you? Try to make me happy. And it's fascinating because with 7 billion other human beings out there, it's fascinating how we could really expect them to behave a particular way. And we could even tell them how they ought to run it. I love it when, we're in a store or something, or, that, people know how they could actually run the store better, they ought to have more cashiers over here. If they did this, like suddenly I'm an expert at retail management. And a minute before that, I'd never really thought about retail management. I can pretty much tell you how they ought to run this place, or how taxi drivers should behave, or, it's one of my old jokes that I read somewhere once that says, too busy It's too bad that the people that could really run this country are too busy driving a cab. You know? If you get in a cab, they could tell you exactly how it ought to be. And everybody's got an opinion, tell you how it should be. So, it's not a very realistic way of being, you know, when we're just part of this whole process. And out of this confusion, how I want things to be, I create a lot of suffering. So instead of playing that game, instead of it continually creating a grasping that somehow this time it'll be different, this job I'll have it made, this relationship's going to be better, this time my vacation, you know, it's all going to be all right. Instead of playing that game, we can turn those three into virtuous activity, roots of virtue. That when I arise, that's what they say. So when we engage in the affairs of daily life, as soon as we become aware of attachment, craving, or clinging that has arisen, well, right then, instead of just getting wrapped up in what I don't have or what I really need or how, you know, it could be better. Recognize that there are a immeasurable number of sentient beings who are subject to the same mental afflictions. We're not alone. Everybody else is doing it too. Everybody else is grasping, hoping this one will be different. They have worries and fears and concerns, just like us. Expand your awareness of this right on the spot. Let the aspiration arise. May those countless sentient beings be endowed with the root of virtue, that is freedom from attachment. May they be free of this attachment that I am now experiencing. The aspiration itself is a root of virtue, so that my own suffering now becomes a virtue, because I recognize everyone else, and now I'm taking it on like, oh, I'm suffering. Imagine how many others are suffering like this. Let me take it on so they don't have to. As opposed to, this sucks, and let me tell my friends how much this sucks. How about let me take this on because it sucks and no one else has to, and I can see my attachment arise. So we take this suffering and it becomes the path to enlightenment. 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. So this works for the attachment. This works for the aversion, anger that arises. You know, seeing that anger arise, just knowing that anger is arising and seeing the damage that's done and knowing how many others get caught up and say things out of anger that they're going to regret tomorrow. How many bridges have we burnt? How many things and people have we harmed? How many others have done such things? Let that go. Let this become a root of virtue of aspiration. That this anger can pass through me and I cannot feed it. Allow it to go. I can see it clearly. And so these 3, as they arise, rather than cultivating them as we typically do mindlessly, creating more samsara, creating more karma, we can actually transform them into the roots of virtue, the aspirations that grow. An opportunity of liberation for ourselves and all sentient beings. So he's going through the point that anger, we recognize the anger. It represents a way for those of us with a Dharma friend or spouse to help each other, provided anger is not directed at the other person. When one flies off the handle, the other can simply say, you know, if you can help someone if you notice they're angry. Anger has arisen. This can, if not vanquish anger, at least snap us halfway out of the craziness. The anger presents us also with opportunity, that once we've recognized it, we recognize also that innumerable sentient beings who, like us, are subject to anger. And when we really understand that, you know, this anger is so destructive, And if I react to it, I mean, it's really hard to react skillfully to anger, isn't it? You know, the antidote is most taught for the anger is just patience. Because that's what people tell you to do when you're angry, right? Breathe. You know, that's not the time to hit send on the email. It's not the time to say what I say. You just let it come, and its anger's arisen. I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to step outside. Just let it go. Let it go. Let it go through. Let it come. Let it go. Don't feed it. And likewise, this happens to our misperceptions of ourselves, and so that we can take these 3 objects, 3 poisons, and those actually become the fuel for the path to enlightenment. And if you think about it, whatever gets us to a room like this, and it isn't because your life's all good, right? What really gets us to work a path is when we have some tension, when something's a struggle, when something's, when I notice. These are always the path that gives rise to the opportunity. The Buddha taught the truth of suffering first, because once we really start to notice how much unnecessary mental and emotional afflictions we have, you know, that's when we're willing to do something to it. But if life's pretty good, you know, my common sense is, you know, we're not planning on cultivating the suffering of all sentient beings. When life's really good, we're planning our vacation and our next trip. And so we want to know that these little rubs, these 3 opportunities, are the opportunities for us to really ripen our potential and merit. Roots of virtue. Go right after that self-cherishing center of the universe. Misperception. That's creating all of my mental and emotional suffering, because it's here, it's not out there. Anger's a mental state. Resentment's a mental state. These are all here, they're not there. No seeds for that. They can't arise. Okay. And the last point here, since we touched on it, I think I can sneak it in, which is in all activities train with words. And so they're just reiterating that point of using your words, saturating your mind. May the suffering of all sentient beings be drawn into me. Keep in mind that this means drawn into my own self-centeredness, that it may be vanquished. And so the idea is that, well, here's another sentence. By my joy, may all beings experience joy. So there's 2 sides of that coin, you know, taking on suffering. But when we're really having joy, may all beings have this joy. This is for everybody. And really seeing that connection. That's where the time that we've taken to see our relationship to others is so important, that empathy that sees. And when they're having joy, we have joy for them. When we have joy, we share it with them. When we're suffering, we're willing to take that suffering on so they don't have it. Where we see that relationship. And we start to notice that everything I experience is always in relationship to and independence upon everybody else. And they are all opportunities for me to see more clearly. And everyone and everything I meet and everything I do is always an opportunity for me to cultivate merit and wisdom, the path to enlightenment. Everything. Everything. All the time. Including going to the bathroom, apparently. Yeah. All right. So that brings us to the end of the second point. We made it. I don't know, 2 months or something? It's a heck of a point. It's a heck of a point. Yeah. Yeah, so those of you that haven't been here when we were unpacking, it was really getting into the actual nature of all phenomenon, the interdependent, empty nature of phenomenon. So we spent a little time on it. So next week we'll come up to the third point which is really the most focused aspect of these teachings, which is how we use difficult events as a path to enlightenment. That's really the beauty of Lojong teachings, transforming adversity to the path. And yeah, really helpful. So here we always take a little time to say prayers for all sentient beings, and we get to practice that virtuous state of mind. And so calling to mind others that we know that are struggling, that are suffering. We know people far away, some close to us that need some extra help. We often will include a name here on our altar and put them in our prayers as well. And we'll go through one rosary's worth of Om Mani Padme Hum. That is the 6-syllable mantra, the Buddha of Compassion. And with each verse, really calling to mind that they may be well, that they may be free of suffering, that they may find enlightenment, and that we're dedicated to that path. So our dedication, dedicating the merit and wisdom for the benefit of all sentient beings, our time together here in the Dharma. Let us dedicate the merit and wisdom that we have accumulated, both individually and collectively, both today and throughout our lives. We dedicate this for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. And may we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes to purify our own minds, to cultivate the mind of awakening, bodhicitta, clear seeing, and find liberation for the benefit of all sentient beings. All right, thank you all so much. Thanks for sharing Wednesday with us. And we have a hand in the back.
You want to mention Sadagawa?
Oh, yeah.